Jesus Christ, what the hell did I eat?
Would you say that came out of your dark side?
Not funny, Cables. Well, actually, you kind of need 3 assholes for that joke to work, but you know.
So, the Darksiders 3 review, and I had originally intended to get this game done along with the first 2 games before the game released on November 27th. And yeah, Merry Christmas.
Now before I get into things, can I ask, how the hell does this game even exist? Because according to this article I read on GameIndustry.biz, the game struggled to break even.
Probably because you are reading it on a website called GameIndustry.biz, which frankly sounds like the title of a website a malware would redirect you to.
Cables? I'm sorry to all those that work at GameIndustry.biz. Yeah, you're right, that's an awful name for a website. Anyways, so actually there's something about the Darksiders series struggle for success that I personally find very endearing, and I hope you guys find my dumbass talking and face to be endearing as well. But anyways, that's not the point. The point is, the Darksiders series is an underdog, and well, everybody loves an underdog, I think.
Apparently, after doing some research, I find out that after THQ was dismantled and its assets liquidated, which includes Vigil Games, the studio that worked on the first 2 Darksiders games, a few things happened. First of which was the formation of the studio Gunfire Games, which included some of the staff from Vigil Games. Why some? Because the rest went to work for Crytek, and if you know what happened to Crytek, then yikes. Anyway, from what I understand, those that went to Crytek found their way back to Gunfire Games, and even though the studio started with less than 10 people, that number got up to 60 by 2017. Alright, that takes care of the developer, time for the publisher. I present to you the scientific graph that pretty much explains everything.
Now, before jumping into the actual game, there's an aspect about the first 2 games that I like that is also present in the 3rd game that I would like to talk about, so let's go.
One of the things I liked about the Darksiders games that I have yet to mention because I felt it would be better to mention it in the review of the latest game in the series is that I like how every game feels like its own game. Darksiders 1, as similar as it may be to the second game, it's actually very different, both traversal wise and combat wise. I'm talking specifically about each Horseman here and not the environmental differences between the 2 games. In the first game, the combat was very beat 'em up style. While very basic and I would have loved to see more, it still felt like it fit War's character. That applies to the traversal as well. While War may not be as agile as Death, he still could do things that Death can't, like double jump and gliding. While Darksiders 1 need improvements, for me to describe the gameplay as fun, War still handled how I expect a guy like him to handle. Same applies to Death. He is way faster and way more lethal compared to his brother when it comes to the combat. He may not be able to do double jumps, but look at him move. He will give spiders nightmares, and with that said, we get to the 3rd game. So how are the controls? Well, actually everything about this game is different compared to the previous game, so Fury definitely has her own unique style.
So, was the game's formula changed to the better? Well, given that the game came out like a month ago, I'm going to give a brief summary on my thoughts regarding the story, and I'm going to keep the spoilers to a minimum, and yeah.
So, the story in simple terms, the 7 deadly sins broke loose. The Charred Council entrusts Fury with the task of bringing all of them back by sucking them into this Pokeball. And that's basically it. And as a kid who grew up playing games like Mega Man and various others where the objective was to get rid of a set of enemies, this is a formula that I'm not only comfortable with, but I also like. But the question is, do I like it here? And the answer to that is, I don't know. Because some of the deadly sins are more developed than others, the ones that are not often feel like placeholder characters. In fact, right now, writing the script, I can fully remember 4 of the deadly sins, and I'm not sure about how the rest look like. I remember fighting them, but not much else. And I guess in that aspect the game fails, but in my opinion it succeeds in another aspect that makes up for the 7 deadly sins shortcomings, or 3 deadly sins shortcomings, and it's an aspect that the 3rd game does leaps and bounds better than the first 2 games, and it's the moment-to-moment interaction Fury has with the different characters she meets during her journey hunting down the deadly sins, namely the Watcher, yes, another one, and the Lord of Bones among others, and so far out of the 3 Horsemen, I find Fury the most interesting. And she is the one I understand the most, probably because she's simple. And get this, some of the cutscenes even made me laugh. The game now follows the more traditional storytelling method of games like God of War. Whether that's a good or a bad thing will be up to you. As for me, it's how I like my action games to play, so I'm happy about it. If I were to complain about anything, it's the times when the plot likes to seem mysterious. That's when it falls flat on its face, because it's a tad predictable. If the game just focused on telling its simple story with a straightforward narrative, it would have been better. But I get it, it's 2018, and even though mindless one-dimensional characters are fun as hell to watch, they are not as deep enough for the artsy-fartsy crowd. Oh, I do declare, Kratos for a mindless monster. His characterization is just awful. Why can't half a god and half a mortal be more like me, for I am a complete and utter douchebag?
I would give the story a B-. It is entertaining to watch to some extent. I mean, what sells it to me, at least, is Fury. Because I've always liked Vegeta-type characters and their arrogance of, I'm number one, there's only one of me. And that's a great aspect of the game. And it's an aspect that I don't think veterans of the series will complain about. What I do know that they're going to complain about, which they already did complain about, is everything related to the gameplay. So let's get into that.
So the gameplay, it's very, very different from the previous games. In the previous games, the combat played more like how a traditional hack and slash game would feel, where unless you're playing in the crazy hard difficulty setting, you really aren't that punished for your mistakes, and coming back from a mishap is easy. In Darksiders 3, however, a single mistake could mean death, where even basic low-level enemies can swarm you if you're not careful. You have to make every hit count. Sounds familiar? Yes, this game took a page out of Dark Souls, just like every game recently. Only difference being that the combat in Darksiders 3 has a faster flow when compared to Dark Souls, where you felt the weight of everything you do in that game. Personally, for me, this combat system gets me absolutely rock hard, making a perfect dodge and then striking back. Ugh, so good. Just feel it.
That feeling, that one you're in right now, that true love. Oh, it feels nice, doesn't it?
Other elements this game took from Dark Souls, and I'm guessing this will be the thing veterans of the Darksiders series will hate the most, is the world design, because this game is a lot less open than Darksiders 2. While still being bigger than your average game, one of the many things people loved about the second game was the open nature of the game, and the fact that there was so much to explore and so many puzzles to solve, and this game's more linear-ish kind of design, I would imagine would be a big turnoff for them. But again, these mechanical differences is one of the things that make me like the Darksiders series, how every Horseman is different from the other, and according to the developers, Darksiders 4 will be completely different from Darksiders 3 in the gameplay department. Why? Because Strife uses guns. And that makes me super duper excited for the next game, and yes, I said duper, because I have no idea what Gunfire Games will produce. That said, I understand the biggest disadvantage when developing games this way is that normally games that have sequels improve with every new release, by taking the foundation that the previous game set and building on it. Just look at the differences between Devil May Cry 1 and Devil May Cry 3. Now that's a freaking sequel. Take a great game and then make one of the greatest games of all time. But Darksiders, as we established, doesn't do that. Though seeing the results with Darksiders 3, they seem to get better with every sequel, at least in my opinion, and I fully expect them to blow Darksiders 4 out of the park-ish. Now, one thing I never liked about the other games is how special weapons were acquired. The special weapons themselves were really cool, but how you got them felt really underwhelming, and again, this might go back to me playing games like Mega Man, where acquiring something always had effects on it and shit. And Darksiders 3 doesn't really fix this per se, but it at least adds a story element to it. Every now and then, the Lord of Bones will give you a new weapon that you could use in your journey. And again, while I would still have liked there to be more excitement when getting a new weapon, I still think this is an improvement, because when that portal opens, man, I know I'm gonna get something really cool. Not to mention that Fury changes just like Mega Man when you switch weapons. The switching is not only for each weapon associated with the form, but your traversal abilities change depending on which form you have on. And having said that, this is the perfect time to discuss the world, and I love it so much. It's actually a mix of Spyro and Dark Souls. It's nowhere near as open-ended as Dark Souls, but the game still opens some paths that you really should not be going to before completing other paths. The game lets you make that mistake, so you realize, oh, I should come back here again when I'm stronger or when I have a certain weapon. It's like Spyro 2, because oftentimes the roadblocks feel the same, like how the first stage in the second game needs you to have the climbing ability, which you can only get from the second world. So you have to play the game and get back to this area later. A lot of people like to complain when games do that, but I actually really like this, because it tests your ability to keep a mental note of things you came across during your journey. Moments like this, which depend on how much you remember, are some of my favorites, because games like Dark Souls don't have a map, so you really do have to remember locations. The game is not so big that it is impossible, it's just the perfect size where remembering stuff is perfectly doable, and honestly, game design like this is a thing of beauty to me, because it makes me feel smart. On a slightly unrelated topic, the game will even let you go fight a boss who you cannot beat without a certain weapon, at least to the best of my knowledge, but the game doesn't tell you that you need that weapon, much like trying to beat the ghost Pokemon without the self-scope. scope, and I love that kind of relaxed game design. After losing about 20 times, I was like, oh, I'll just come back later. The final thing I have to talk about when in regards to that is the traversal. As I said, every form not only provides you with a weapon, but also a traversal move. So oftentimes while playing, you're going to have to switch between the different forms to get a piece of treasure or to simply move forward. And I got to say, I absolutely love how natural and smooth everything feels. I never liked how awkward switching between weapons was in the previous games, where I had to access a menu to do it. Now that done, when it comes to the fighting, I have a few complaints. Being that the game tried to emulate Dark Souls a little bit, that means that this game has a severe lack of combos, which results in the upgrade paths being a little too straightforward for my taste. Which, hey, that wasn't the focus of this game, but it still tried to find a balance between Dark Souls and a hack and slash game, so it would have been nice for me not to do the same thing over and over again. Not to mention that they could have done so much more with weapon attachments and upgrades. As things stand, everything about the weapons and upgrades comes off as extremely shallow, and to a certain extent lazy.
Again, I completely understand why fans of the second game would dislike said game. This game. Because the things that turned me off about the second game turned me on about the third game, and I could imagine the exact opposite happening to fans of the second game. Now that said, overall I think that the third game did what it wanted to do better than the second game doing what it wanted to do with its gameplay elements, and I can't believe I got all that right. Anyways, so let's move on.
Now, let's talk about the problems I ran while playing the game. This game, much like the second game, crashed on me twice. First time it just froze and I had to restart the game, and the second time it crashed, and the final issue I had with this game was when I got to the underwater segment, for some reason the frame rate dropped hard and just stayed at 30. I don't know if this was a VSync issue or what, but after I restarted the game ran smoothly at 60 FPS again, so 2 crashes and a frame rate problem. Given that this game is over 12 hours long, I would say that's not bad. Oh, and one final thing, this is not a real problem since I did this myself, but I was able to go out of bounds in this game, so yeah, that was pretty cool and something you can do if you know where to go.
Well, I could easily recommend Darksiders 3 to fans of the hack and slash genre. You know, if you like Dark Souls combat but you just want a more in your face kind of a story. Darksiders 3 is a good game, and it's actually my favorite in the series. It's a game I'll definitely come back to play, because honestly I didn't feel the 12-hour runtime of the game. And yeah, so with that being said, for those of you who are watching, wherever you may be in this world, I can't believe I finished Darksiders, the whole 3 games. Thank you guys for watching, and stay alive until the next video.